Gustafson Barlette with the Times Union and timesunion.com, and welcome to 20 Things Plus, where we catch up with someone previously featured on the Times Union's 20 Things You Don't Know About Me. Today we are joined by Jason Gough. Jason is the meteorologist for the Times Union. He also has a weekly newsletter and website, and he's doing a whole bunch of other things that we'll get to shortly. Hi, Jason.
Hey, Kristi. Nice to see you.
You too. Thank you so much for joining us. So Jason, let's start by talking about, in your original 20 Things, you mentioned how you were a waiter down in Washington, D.C. when you lived in Maryland. And I know you waited on several celebrities, and that had to be a really interesting job. So talk to us a little bit about it.
It was super cool. If you're familiar with DC, the name of the restaurant is called the Occidental, and there's a golfing reference here. It's about a 7-iron from the South Lawn of the White House. I mean, it's right in downtown DC, right on Pennsylvania Avenue. It's connected to an old hotel called the Willard Hotel, where they used to stash Abraham Lincoln there when they were worried about assassination attempts. The term lobbyist came out of that hotel with U.S. Grant. So yeah, it was such a cool experience. I really lucked out. When I moved to Maryland, transferred from Auburn, my brother-in-law at the time, he helped me to get that gig. And I'd worked in restaurants for a long time, but never like fine dining, but I was pretty good at it. And so they would, whenever celebrities came in, if I was working, they would sit at my table, and it was super cool that the day before I waited on Al Pacino, they called me to tell me that. So I actually I skipped a couple of classes at Maryland. I went to an old, like a collectibles kind of a shop on Wisconsin Avenue in DC, and I found his movie poster from his very first movie. And I never asked anybody for autographs, but this is Al freaking Pacino, you know what I'm saying? So I was like, okay, I had to do this, and I asked him to sign it, and he did. He was the nicest guy. It was so cool. But kind of as an update to this, you mentioned Hank Aaron. He unfortunately passed away, as you know, about 6 weeks ago. So I want to tell you the story about how I met him and interacted with him. I was waiting on just a private party, and it was a small group, like 12 or 14 people. And I was waiting for them to show up. Just down from the restaurant was a theater called the National Theater, and Rent was playing. It was a really well-known musical at the time. So we used to get a pre-theater crowd that came in. So I'm helping the hostess seat people at tables while I'm waiting for my other group to come in. And this gentleman comes in with his wife, and I'm thinking to myself, God, this guy looks like Hank Aaron. But of course, I didn't say anything. He came in and he said, can my wife and I have a table? And I said, I'm sorry, sir, all of our tables are booked. And there's an important point of reference here. I looked at my watch, and it was 6:27 in the evening. And he came in and he wanted a seat. All the tables were booked. We had reservations. There was only one two-top left on the whole floor. So he was just kind of standing there, and he said to me, what I thought he said was, Hank Aaron sent me over from the White House. And I'm thinking, all right, well, this is just too weird. And I said, you look like Hank Aaron. And he said, well, I am. I'm like, well, don't I feel like a knucklehead, you know? So while we're talking, I'm looking at my watch, and we're just kind of shooting the breeze for those few minutes. And at 6:30, that two-top that had a reservation didn't show up. At least they were late. So I said, well, that's a you problem. So I said, Mr. Aaron, we do have a table for you. The 6:30 reservation didn't show. I sat him at the table. That was that. I went down and checked on him one time. And then as they were leaving, I was back out in the main area there, and he came up the stairs, and he said to me, oh, good, you saved me the trouble of looking for you. And I said, okay. And he said, do you have a business card? So I gave him a card from the restaurant, and he said, thank you very much. I want to send you something for taking such good care of me and my wife. And I said, that's not necessary. It was an honor to meet you, sir, and all of that. You're just the nicest guy. We stood in the lobby and talked for a few minutes. His wife was very gracious. I'm sure she dealt with that all the time. And they left. And about a week later, I get a box sent to the restaurant with my name from Hank Aaron. He sent me 2 books autographed, these 2 pictures autographed. This is his executive portrait when he was a vice president of the Atlanta Braves. And then that's him hitting his record-setting home run and also a signed baseball, which I tried to find. It's in a box somewhere, but it was the most incredible experience. I mean, this is Hank Aaron. This guy, I mean, he'd always been a hero of mine anyway, because he's such a great ball player and had to endure so much junk just because of the color of his skin. And he just handled it with such grace all the way through, to the point where he sends, some random waiter a box with some things just for seating him and his wife at a table. It was incredible.
Well, that's so cool. And I love that our second update is also food related. It's almost like you went from the front side of the restaurant to the back end, and you were cooking, right? Did you cook at a restaurant, or you definitely, at least you're into cooking? I remember, and I don't know if you'll remember this, many, many, many years ago, you dropped off soup for me that you made at the Times Union. And you remember that?
I do.
This is a long time ago. But you've always been into cooking. I know you were working on a cookbook when we spoke originally. So where are you in your culinary journey?
Well, I'm still just kind of like putzing around, and I have a binder, I mean, and it is thick with recipes, and I look up recipes all the time. I follow some great sites on Twitter. Bon Appetit, Honest Cooking is a really good one. Benita Zahn got me into that, and they publish all kinds of recipes. So yeah, and during the pandemic, it was basically a year ago today, right? It's so amazing to think about that, like where we were a year ago, and everything was locked down. I had my show, which we'll talk about, that was kind of on the rocks because of the budget concerns and all that in the state. So I'm like, well, what the hell am I going to do? And I've always enjoyed cooking and teaching people how to cook. I put that cookbook out when I lived in Texas to benefit the Kids Cafe. That was a lot of fun to do that. So I have this little galley kitchen, and I set my camera up. I bought a little microphone that you can plug into your camera, and I just wanted to make like some different recipes, and I had a really good time doing it. So I put that on my website, on jasonsweather.com, and I just called it Cooking Weather, because the great thing about weather is you can tie it into anything, right? Like people, and especially when you're talking about food, like people generally don't make a big pot roast in August, you know what I mean? So we tend to follow the seasons. And so I thought, well, this would just be a good opportunity for me to do, and nothing terribly complex. And before I started even doing that, I got into cooking different dishes. I have a lot of go-tos that I do. I cook a lot of Italian, a lot of Mexican. And I thought, I want to get into cooking a little bit more Asian food. So I cooked some recipes that I'd never tried before: Thai, Vietnamese, Chinese, Korean, and it was a lot of fun. And that was when I just decided, well, maybe I'll just video this and put it up on my website and let people know about it. And it got a fair amount of views. And I made everything from what I call the perfect grilled cheese sandwich to breakfast tacos to a couple of different soups. And people would email me, ask me questions. And
well, you talk about all these delicious recipes you make, and they not only sound like they taste good, they also sound like they could be kind of high on the calories, which brings us to your next one, because you got into fitness during the pandemic, right? So were you working off the grilled cheese and the Italian and the Mexican for the last year by getting into exercising and going for walks and all that kind of thing?
Yeah, I hadn't thought about it in that sense, but you're right. They tended to be a little bit higher in calories, but my sense.
That's what makes it taste good, Jason.
What's that?
That's what makes it taste good.
Of course.
But okay, yeah, so tell us about your fitness and your exercising.
Of course, I just turned 50, so you can't burn calories that you could when you were 20.
Right.
But if you work out, you still have a little bit more leeway in terms of your menu choices. So I'd always worked out, and then I kind of got away from it. I was just doing a lot of other things, and it just kind of became one of those things that was like, I don't have time and all that sort of thing. And what I found out is, especially during the pandemic, when people were basically locked down and you're not seeing people, and it's easy to get into a funk, and a lot of people did. And you don't realize until you get into it and do it, you don't realize how important exercise is. Just make it part of your day. And I made a conscious decision to do it. And it's the proverbial like 3 weeks. Once you get into something and you do it on a consistent basis for 3 weeks, then it just becomes part of your routine. So I really got into it. I learned a little bit more about weightlifting, different techniques and all of that sort of thing. especially as you get older. It's important to keep your strength up. It's good for your bones, your muscles, and all of that. So I really got into it, and it started off just by going for walks every day with my dog, and then getting back as soon as the gyms opened up. I was so ready to get back to the gym, and that's what I've been doing ever since. And I'm stronger now physically than I've ever been in my life.
And I think that's a good example too of, we've talked previously with other readers and did a story on how good things come out of the pandemic, because it seems like it's been all depressing. And obviously it's been very depressing, but there's also been good things, like people have improved their health, improved their culinary skills and things like that. Now, another thing you've been doing, and I need to know more about this, you were selling your own PPE, or you had your own PPE distribution company.
Yes.
What was that all about?
Talk about funny where life takes you, right? So I had my television show, Whine About the Weather, that I did. It was actually 5 years ago, and the ratings were really good. People liked the show, and the ratings were such that it was like, hey, I think I'm onto something here. So I had been trying over the years to get the show funded through the state, because it was, it's an agritourism show. We're talking about New York wines. We're talking about regions of the state and all of that. So I actually kind of became my own lobbyist in that sense. And I lobbied the state. I learned kind of the ins and outs, being around the LOB and being in the Capitol and all of that. And I was really making some headway through February of last year to get that show funded. I had made the right connections, talked to the right people. Then, of course, COVID hit, the bottom fell out, and I was out of luck. So I'm like, well, I got to do something. So one of my best friends, one of my fraternity brothers, you can kind of see the banner of my fraternity over my head. He is one of the smartest guys I know. He started his own company and now actually has a couple of companies, and he has connections all over the place. So he was one of the guys that you read about in the paper that was able to bring in PPE and distribute it. He had the supply chain, he had the customers. So he was like, man, why don't you sell some of this stuff up there? He's based in Atlanta. Why don't you sell some of this stuff up there? I'm sure people need it. It's like, okay.
So where were you listing it? Were you posting it to Marketplace? Were you posting it to Craigslist? Or where were people buying was it masks, gloves, that kind of thing?
It was masks and hand sanitizer were the two things that I started with. And I still have it on my website on jasonsweather.com. So I had that's kind of the retail part of it. So people can go on there, they ordered stuff. And I had a great time doing that because I rented out a little storage unit. I have like a little assembly line with envelopes and boxes and things. So people order it, I print it out, pack it up and ship it out. There's a shipping house right next to my storage unit. So I would send out individuals, their items, they wanted masks and everything else. So that was really cool. But then I also what do I know about business, right? I'm just an idiot weatherman. How do I know about actually conducting your own business? But to me, it's just kind of common sense. I just started making phone calls. So I called school districts, I called nursing homes, I called rehab facilities and places like that, and just said, hey, I have this stuff available. If you want it, here it is. And I ended up developing a good customer base. I have 9 or 10 different school districts that have bought a lot of stuff through me. It was difficult for them to find things, and I just pride myself on customer service. I delivered everything by hand, except for stuff that had to actually be freighted, big pallets and things like that. And that's basically what I did. And I'm still kind of dabbling in it, but obviously things have started to fall off a little, which I figured they would, and that's a really good thing. I knew it was a
that might not be as good for you for business, but it's good for us as a society. And I know your third one is that your third new thing is that you are considering a new career, which is interesting because I feel like you've kind of dabbled and touched on a whole bunch of other new careers during the pandemic. So what's next for you, Jason?
That's a good question. I'm still kind of trying to figure out the answer to that. It's been quite a journey, since I left the station. I've done a lot of different things, and I think it's enriched my life just because you're getting different experiences, starting a business and doing all this other stuff. So I've had a couple of calls that I've talked with Kathy Sheehan, Mayor Sheehan in Albany, some exciting things going on in the city of Albany. I've talked to some different lobbying firms. because again, when I was lobbying for my show, and then even before that, I did some lobbying for the Child Victims Act.
Right.
So, that's a whole different space, and you really kind of have to know the ins and outs. You develop relationships with people, you talk to different people in the halls and the elevators. So that's a kind of I'm kind of gravitating toward that, but I'm also going to be looking into some communications positions and even a spokesman position. I have some stuff into the governor's office because I have some people that I know there. So I'm just really kind of fanning out and trying to figure out what I want to do. But you can look at it in two ways. Like, it's kind of scary because it's like, well, what am I going to do next? But that's just a small piece of it. The larger piece is like, this is really exciting because I have an opportunity to do something and really get into it. And I've been good at every job I've ever had, so I have no fear of jumping into something that is a little bit out of my comfort zone. You learn, you observe, and you communicate, and you go on from there.
Well, it's cool too, because it almost sounds like your professional life as an adult has come full circle. You talked in the beginning of this interview about how your first job as a waiter, where you were connected to that hotel, that's where the term lobbyist came from. And
Yeah.
now, all these years later, you're doing lobbying as one of your many things. So thanks again, Jason. I appreciate you joining us.
Kristi, thank you so much. It was great to see you.